Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War Frontline update for the 10th of December 2023. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, then please pause the video and check out the key on the screen at the moment. Before we go to the front line, Max23 just reports, I think he's praising what the Commander of the Ground Forces of the AFU has said. The situation in the east is difficult. The Russians are advancing along the entire front. Quote, decisions were made to ensure the stability of the defense and save the lives of the soldiers. Jay in Kyiv says, a friend at the front just told me that they are indeed now conserving ammunition, unable to repel Russian advances as they were a month ago, solely due to uncertain supply chains. So that lack of military aid, predominantly I assume from the US, and not knowing when they are going to get consistent ammunition packages, they're having to think carefully about how they use their equipment and their ammunition. So yeah, interesting stuff. So let's go to the front line. Broadly speaking, not looking great for the Ukrainians. We're going to somewhat skip the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna. I've had a very busy day already out with my boy, watching him play sports and whatnot, so I'm somewhat behind. Thank you so much to JR who's done the mapping for today, but I'm not going to dip into the ISW, but there's no doubt activity going along all the entire front line, really, from the very top to the very bottom. But we're going to pop in to look at what Global War Monitor says here. Ukraine has advanced in the Kreminna forest immediately south of the town of Kreminna. This is a second advancement on this axis in this week. I can't confirm that has happened, but there is a claim that the Ukrainians have made some gains around here, just north of Dnipro. And we'll see if that pans out with what other mappers say as the days go by. That is pretty much where the positivity for the Ukrainians might well be ending. So we'll come to look at the north of Bakhmut, the Robotyne area, and between Krasnohorivka, another one. Krasnopolivka, actually, no, I stand corrected. Krasnopolivka and Yakovlivka here. So that we've got this area of sort of high ground here. The Ukrainians, it looks like they've made some ground here and lost some ground there, as according to Deep State map. But as JR says, see their map. Well, let's go and look at the Deep State map to see if we can make sense of that. So looking at it over time, so this is the area north of Bakhmut. We zoom in just a little bit. You've got Robotyne, you've got Yakovlivka, and you've got Krasnopolivka just over here. But as you can see, this is on the 6th of this month, the 7th, and then the 8th, no change, 9th, quite a lot of change, as that whole front line was kind of equalized. It was straightened up there. And that is really big news if that indeed had happened or has happened. Then the next day, we see potentially a counterattack from the Ukrainians there. For me, it's probably more likely that the claims of that being equalized right across there were over-egged, and indeed the Russians hadn't taken that whole area of land there. So rather than being a gain, it's probably that it just wasn't taken back. We'll see what Andrew Perpetua says on his next mapping update. But yeah, this looks like an area where the Russians are pressuring as well. Suret Maps, on the other hand, has them equalizing it right across the top there, with Russians making those gains here. So situation on the Eastern Front, Russian army made significant advance south of Robotyne and southwest of Vasily. A semicircle movement is taking place to force the Ukrainian army to withdraw from the last village. So that is what Suret Maps is claiming. And then as we come down further, around to Kromove, Bukivka, Bodonivka area, we have the Russians gaining, as according to Deep State map, just here. And then the Russians gaining, according to Suret map, right across from Kromove up the ridge or the hill towards Bodonivka there, and making the Ukrainians sweat it out here in the contested grey zone of this higher ground. I think this is a bit of a problem for the Ukrainians if this is indeed happening. If we go to Surat maps, they say of the area, the Russian armies captured the rest of the trenches north of Kreminna. In addition, troops continue advancing from many axes, forcing the Ukrainian army to withdraw from one of the series of positions towards more fortified areas adjacent to the road to Chasiv Yar. So the 00506 highway here, coming up past that dirt track there. So the Ukrainians under a lot of pressure from both or multiple areas here, so all around this area, and then having to pull back along this highway to. We do understand that they've been building up defences, fortifications around Chasiv Yar area. So yeah, expect there to be a stern defence of Chasiv Yar if it comes to that. But the Russians are certainly making gains here, if Surat maps is to be believed. And actually, you know, I probably do think that the Russians are making, it might not be the gains that Surat maps is claiming, but they are definitely on the up in the area. And then finally, they say, this is against Surat maps, take it with a pinch of salt, of course. Situation north of Bakhmut. Recent video shows the Russian army being deployed in the abandoned trenches at the road towards Chasiv Yar. During the battle for Bakhmut, this area was a bloody field where many lives were lost on both sides. Now, Ukrainian army is retreating from all of its defensive lines due to the pressure from different sides by the Russian forces that are progressing with relative speed, they say. And using geolocation of this, they look like the Desert Cross 1003 vehicles to me, and you can see how useful they are here in crossing this terrain quite quickly. I wonder if they're too light to trigger certain pressure mines. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see that. But yeah, being used around here, we've seen them be used around the Kreminna area, around the Dnipro River Delta. But it could be that they're being very useful for the Russians there. Very light vehicles provided by China, rather controversially. Okay, so as we come out of Bakhmut, where it's looking fairly troubling for the Ukrainians, we come into Avdiivka, where it looks like there's not too much change to the mapping. Have a little bit here that the Russians might have gained just in the datches by the treatment plants. The sewage treatment plant, I believe it is, southeast of the Terracon. We'll go and look at some of the sources. Well, I've only got one source here. The Avdiivka frontline. Ukrainian forces regain control over a building in the northwestern part of Promka. So this is the area, the what's it called? The industrial area. Words are so difficult today. They might have taken control of a building here. I don't know exactly where that is, but you know, it's not exactly going to set the world alight, is it? But you know, it might indicate that Ukrainians are trying to push back in that area. But other than that, not too much news from Avdiivka. The weather is probably hampering efforts to move for both sides there. But this is just a quick skirt through. There's an awful lot more detail to add to everything I'm saying, of course. We bypass Mariinka, Vuhledar, and Velika Novosilka, where no doubt there's a lot of activity, but no changes to the front lines. And then we come down to the Robotyne area. So what has happened here is, well, Ukrainian gains from the 10th to the 12th of according to deep state map. So I just missed that when I'd done my mapping previously. So sorry about that. Thank you, JR. And then some Russian gains as well. So bit of catching up with the mapping of deep state maps here. But Andrew Perpetua's just done a live video, a very short 10-minute video, where he looks at the claims that have been in existence since Friday that the Russians have taken over some southerly streets of Robotyne. They pushed back. And he's like, I'm not sure that they have successfully done that. I've seen no evidence that they took the streets, but they are fighting over, I think, this tree line here. And it could be, or probably both tree lines. Let's just get my bearings. Yeah, so it's definitely this tree line here to the south of Robotyne where the Russians have been attacking fiercely. Now, apparently they took control of that. Then the Ukrainians pushed them back in a counterattack and pushed them out of there. And that, it could be where you get sort of gains like that coming in. But apparently the Russians are now trying to push the Ukrainians out of there. So it's very dynamic at the moment. These tree lines can sometimes swap several times in a day. They are fighting hard over this area. And as you can see, all the mappers really have Russians making gains in the Robotyne sector south of Robotyne itself, between Novoprokopivka and Robotyne. So that is troubling again for the Ukrainians. It shows, I think, a turn of events taking place, a switch of momentum back towards the Russians in this area, and they are trying to attack while the Ukrainians have stalled. And then back to Krinky, there's not too much news coming out of Krinky and Pidstepny and along the river delta. There is to go back to Robotyne, No Reports does report that Russians retook some area, making the big trench network area contested again. So that's that Alien's Head trench. It's just there that I often talk about. It seems like neither party really has the power to move forward, although it does look like the Russians have moved forward a little bit, and that's what Surat Map said about that area, taking control over the trench area to the south of Robotyne. Now finally getting on to the Dnipro River area. We have no reports saying of Krinky, no changes to the map confirmed. 2 big Russian mechanized attacks were repelled, destroying lots of heavy equipment, such as tanks, IFVs, and APCs. 1 attack happened in the western outskirts, and 1 coming from the forest area to the south of Krinky. So the Russians are pushing in several areas, trying to take back that land and push the Ukrainians off and out of their bridgehead and back to the other side of the river, but they're being met with stiff resistance as the Ukrainians are successfully destroying an awful lot of equipment in that area. There's quite a trove of first-person view drone footage coming out of particularly this area. Lots of tanks, IFVs, and APCs destroyed during a Russian attack near Krinky, says No Reports, and has a video detailing some of those losses for the Russians. So it's really expensive for the Russians here, but they are trying very hard to push the Ukrainians back. And of course, they don't really care too much about the human cost to such actions, and so they'll just keep plugging on until they get that territorial success. And that's kind of maybe the story of actions over the last really 6 months, and that gives you an indication as to partly why the Russians never really capitulated. They don't really care about their troops to the point where you have claims of barrier troops, you have poorly trained and equipped soldiers being thrown into frontline in certain places, but it doesn't mean that they can't fight and they won't fight. And in fact, they're scared not to fight. And so as long as you have boots in those trenches, you have guns firing back at the attackers who have to negotiate minefields and obstacles. And so it's very difficult for the Ukrainians to make any consistent gains and consolidate upon them. And now we're at a point where that momentum has switched, and the Ukrainians are now taking a more defensive stance in most of the front line. So the Russians are certainly having more success at the moment, are pressuring the Ukrainians. We'll see how this develops as this next week goes forward. More than ever, the Ukrainians need assistance, really, as far as I can see. Anyway, what do you think? I'd be really interested in your thoughts. Take care. Please like, subscribe, and share. Toodle Pip, speak tomorrow. Oh, no, sorry, wrong. Speak later, because I'm doing a live stream with Rick the Ukrainian. Hopefully that's going to work, and that will be at, 6:30 my time? So that is 3 hours time from now. So I'm recording this at 3:30 my time. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that and come and join in the conversation.